It's August on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in western South Dakota, and the annual powwow is in full swing. The celebration is a highlight for the Oglala Sioux tribe, bringing together thousands of Native Americans to sing, dance, and honor their traditional culture. Tonight's good cheer, however, is in stark contrast to everyday life in one of the most difficult places to live in the United States. Few people in the Western Hemisphere have shorter life expectancies. Males on average live to just 48 years old, females to 52. Almost half of all people above the age of 40 have diabetes, and the economic realities are even worse. Unemployment rates are consistently above 80%. In Shannon County, inside the Pine Ridge Reservation, half the children live in poverty, and the average income is $8,000 a year. But there are funds available, a federal pot now worth more than $1 billion. That sits here in the U.S. Treasury Department, waiting to be collected by 9 Sioux tribes. The money stems from a 1980 Supreme Court ruling that set aside $105 million to compensate the Sioux for the taking of the Black Hills in 1877. They're an isolated mountain range rich in minerals that stretch from South Dakota to Wyoming. The only problem, the Sioux never wanted the money because the land was never for sale.
The Black Hills are very important to the Sioux Indian tribes because they are the spiritual center of Sioux people.
For tribal attorney Mario Gonzalez, the compensation fund is the embodiment of Indian mistreatment by the U.S. government, and the taking of the Black Hills was the gravest sin of all.
The Sioux tribes have always maintained that confiscation is illegal and that the tribes must have some of their ancestral lands returned to them.
Compared to the natural resource-rich Black Hills, the reservations the Sioux were relegated to are mostly dry, desolate landscapes. Shannon County has one of the lowest per capita incomes in the United States.
At one time, the Sioux Indians were a wealthy people, and they had, a place here that satisfied all their needs.
The land dispute dates back to 1868, when the U.S. signed a treaty at Fort Laramie that set aside the Black Hills as part of the Great Sioux Reservation. But when gold was discovered in the hills a few years later, the floodgates opened and Western pioneers poured in, and the Fort Laramie Treaty was broken.
There's a long history of treaties having been made with Indian tribes that were broken. Some would say that no treaty was ever kept with an Indian tribe.
Ross Swimmer served as a special trustee for American Indians during the George W. Bush administration.
It's been a psychological issue for all the Sioux tribes all this time, and much of that land is still owned by the federal government. And so the tribes are simply saying, well, wait a minute, you took our land, we want the land back.
From 2003 to 2009, Swimmer oversaw the Black Hills Trust account, one that grew substantially from the initial $105 million settlement.
Tribal monies invested have to be in basically government securities or better, where there's no danger of loss. 30 years later, it's worth $1 billion, so it's not a bad return.
But the Sioux say that money is far less than what the land is worth. The Black Hills are a major draw for tourists, helping to promote an industry that generates over $2 billion of economic activity every year for the state of South Dakota. And there are still questions on the best way to distribute the $1 billion. Any compensation money for the Sioux would mainly be distributed on a per capita basis.
If you've got 100,000 Sioux and $1 billion, you're talking about 10,000 apiece or something. That goes pretty fast.
That type of plan is totally unacceptable to the Sioux tribes because when you give out per capita payments, the money is gone in a year or two, and then the tribes still end up with nothing to show for their ancestral lands.
After more than 130 years of standoff over what the U.S. government owes the Sioux, President Obama's election to office appeared to provide an opening.
I'm absolutely committed to moving forward with you and forging a new and better future together.
The president said he would meet with the Sioux tribes on the Black Hills land claim, the first to do so. Obama said the 9 tribes must first agree unanimously on a proposal among themselves. That is a problem, says Native American journalist Tim Giago, who has covered this story for more than 30 years.
We got a lot of infighting, a lot of squabbling amongst our own people. There have been meetings taking place in the past year and a half, 2 years on the different reservation in which a lot of the people are coming together, and they're sitting down and actually discussing the whole prospects about where we're going to go.
Teresa Tubles is a former Oglala Sioux president who helped organize the efforts to restart the Black Hills talks following Obama's 2008 election. She agrees with Giago that there are serious divisions, but says that the tribes are making progress.
This is the closest we've gotten. And believe me, it's hard to unite people. You know, it's hard to stay positive, but you have to. I'm tired of this poverty, tired of this rut that we live in.
Gonzalez says the tribes have formed a reparations alliance and are aiming to finalize a proposal to be submitted to Congress by the end of the year. He hopes that proposal will give the Sioux shared ownership of over 1 million acres of federal land within the Black Hills, along with financial compensation. But he quickly points out that the Sioux are not seeking any private property and knows that popular tourism attractions will be off the table.
The tribes are trying to be realistic. When the Sioux tribes are asking that all the federal lands be returned to them, that does not include Mount Rushmore, post offices, or any property that is being used by the government for governmental purposes.
And what Gonzalez and the Sioux are asking for does have precedent. President Nixon returned nearly 50,000 acres of federal lands in the Carson National Forest in New Mexico to the Taos Pueblo tribe in 1970. And although recent polls show the younger generation of the Sioux more willing to accept the Black Hills money, some of the poorest people in the country have thus far remained steadfast in their opposition to taking it.
It's a tough group up there. You know, I'm amazed that they have been willing to sit on the money, so to speak, this long without, taking the money.
We accept the money, then we don't have the treaty obligations that the federal government has with us for taking our land, for taking our gold, all our resources out of the Black Hills.
Sioux leaders say they will take up the Black Hills issue again at tribal meetings in the coming months.